Yamamoto was killed with only 3 bullets. White smoke emerged from Lee Bok-sung's fingertips like she was a Western cowboy. She really was a tough grandmother. The disaster of fame has been killed. The disaster called a colonialist has disappeared. You have earned 5,000 coins. Major contributors? Lee Bok-sung, Kim Dokja. It was regrettable that I didn't catch the snake, but hunting the prime minister wasn't a bad income. The absence of the prime minister in the upcoming wall would greatly undermine the advance of the Japanese army. The compensation was also great. Some constellations are against your excessive nationalistic sentiment. There were many constellations complaining about my scenario, but it couldn't be helped. Nationalism on the Korean peninsula gave coins. If I had to sell a story, then it was better to sell it at an expensive price. Many constellations of the Korean peninsula are cheering for your reenactment. 10,000 coins have been sponsored. Indeed, there were constellations who haven't forgotten the old days. The confused Japanese incarnations ran towards Yamamoto, but it was already too late. Prime Minister! In the meantime, I ran towards Lee Bok-sung, who was a dozen meters away. Lee Bok-sung's body was rapidly shrinking. The character Lee Bok-sung has completely abandoned her rights as a disaster. The Dokubi of the Starstream sees Lee Bok-sung's behavior as taking action against the scenario. The small person transformation will begin. Lee Bok-sung had a tired expression, but it seemed to be the after effect of using 3 shots. The stigmas of certain constellations could cause severe physical and mental damage to the person who used it. Thus, she was completely exhausted the moment she used the stigma. Young man, give me a lift. Put on the clothes in my pocket first. There were a few pieces of clothing I got in return for saving the small people earlier. I put the grandmother in the left pocket of my coat, and Lee Bok-sung and Lee Ji-hee helped her dress. Way of the Wind level 8 has been activated. Now the remaining time for bookmark was 10 minutes. Now I had to get out of the forest area in 10 minutes. The Prime Minister is dead! Stop them! The Japanese people were angry. You have received the second scenario penalty. Hunt the small people in 5 minutes. Otherwise, the Starstream will determine that you have no intention to carry out the activities of a disaster. Damn, it was 5 minutes rather than 10 minutes. The time was too short. Take me with you! The Japanese woman inside the cage that Yamamoto had dropped when he died shouted. Please, please! Asuka ran. I felt no hesitation. I intended to bring her with me in the first place. I jumped forward like a gust of wind and placed her in my hand after smashing her cage. Thank you! Really? I skipped the greetings and tensed the muscles of both legs. Hold on tightly. I used all of my magic power. The wind split apart and the fastest road appeared. The wind force around my legs captured the precise movements of my muscles and created the optimum speed. Colonization had disappeared, and it was easier to run than before. However, my stats were halved and the speed wasn't satisfactory. However, I could actually reach the speed with a level 30 agility. Way of the Wind was truly great skill. Asuka Ren told me, You are really fast. This speed is as good as Karasu from Japan. Karasu was probably referring to the Tengu Karasu. I'll be faster if I have more power. Do you know Karasu? It is a classic monster from Japan. I should be faster than Karasu Tengu with Way of the Wind, but now wasn't the time. Besides, I couldn't say that Way of the Wind was my skill. Bookmark had a time limitation. Kill him! In any case, we will just become smaller. We will take care of the smaller ones, so kill him! The Japanese didn't hesitate anymore. Get revenge for the Prime Minister! A few swords narrowly missed my shoulder. It was dangerous, but then the terrain in front of me started to change. The surrounding trees wriggled and took the shape of a forest path. The shape of the forest was changing. I thought it was magic, but Asuka Ren told me, It is night! Look out! I belatedly recalled a mention of it in Ways of Survival. The forest area of Peaceland changed shape at night. It was a type of labyrinth as the forest itself turned into the stomach of a giant monster. Sticky digestive juices emerged wherever I walked. The reason why the small people of Peaceland didn't enter this forest was because none of them returned when it was night. Catch him! Hack! The forest camouflage had begun, and the Japanese people chasing me seemed lost. Of course, the big disasters couldn't be digested by the forest, but there was enough time. Hunt the small people in 3 minutes. I did my best, but the maze-like forest area paralyzed my sense of direction. There was no specific way to escape from the night forest and ways of survival. Instead, this way! It was written in Ways of Survival. The first person to be obtained in Peaceland is Oscar Wren. I followed Oscar Wren's directions. Run to the right at that tree. Japanese lady, do you know the way? Lee Bok-sung asked in fluent Japanese, and Oscar Wren replied hesitantly, I know this forest well. Ooh, is it a relevant skill? Yes. I knew that Oscar Wren was lying. She couldn't navigate this forest because of a pathfinding skill. Perhaps as far as Peaceland was concerned, she was much as an expert in it as I was in Ways of Survival. Maybe this is why the Japanese saved her. I carried Oscar Wren and used Way of the Wind at its highest level. I ran quickly, but the time limit was faster. Hunt the small people in 1 minute. A bit more, just a bit more. Catch him! We must catch him! The number of Japanese people chasing me decreased sharply as the road twisted several times. Almost there. Finally, I reached the end of the forest zone. You were unable to hunt the small people within the time limit. The Dokubis of the Starstream have determined that you will not carry out the activities of a disaster. You have been given a third scenario penalty. The small person transformation will begin. Damn. Get away from me! My party members noticed something in my shout and removed themselves from my body. It was like my body was being spun in a juicer. The power left my body and there was the sound of thunder in my ears. I blinked again and my line of sight was almost at the ground. This was how a small person felt. Fortunately, the coat shrank with my body. I didn't lose any items because I placed all of them in the subspace, including Unbroken Faith. The problem was when I took them out again. Ajashi, are you okay? I nodded towards my party members and spoke to Oscar Wren, who was watching me from a distance. Oscar Renshi. Did I introduce myself? The other Japanese people told me your name. I would like you to take my party members to Veronica Castle. Oscar's eyes grew bigger at my words. She wondered how I knew the name of a place in Peaceland. There is no time to explain. Please, I will stop them here. I understand. There was the sound of Japanese people breathing in the distance. 3 of them managed to chase me to the end. They varied in height, but all of a sudden, they all looked like monsters. Damn Josenjing! If there was one person, then the party members might somehow be able to defeat them after joining forces, but 3 of them? There was no certainty that we could beat them, even if we used all our powers. Lee Hyung-sung said, We can't leave you alone. You have to go, so that all of you can live. I have a way to escape if I am alone. The Japanese people who had struggled through the labyrinth forest spat on the ground and smiled cruelly at us. I'll trample on them like bugs. I watched them approach and shouted, Gil-young! Lee Gil-young nodded with understanding. Small insects were flying towards his side. I will see all of you later. The insects started carrying the group members on their backs in 1s or 2s. Based on the speed of the insects, quite some distance could be gained while I buy time. Wait a minute! Ajashi! Shin Yu-sung cried out as a samurai blade flew towards me. The blade stabbed into the ground next to me. There was a wave of magic power, and I reflexively rolled my body. It wouldn't be a big deal when I was a human, but now even the edge of a blade was dangerous for me. Maybe I would simply be cut in 2. Die! I had a plan to catch the Prime Minister with Lee Bok-sung, but now I had no specific measures. I could somehow buy time by running into the labyrinth forest again, or... I will kill him. Chase after the rest. 2 of the 3 Japanese people nodded and chased after the people on the insects. I couldn't let that happen. The stigma non-violent zone level 1 has been used. The Japanese people stopped. Damn! Again? The struck Japanese people looked back at me with irritation. My magic power had been significantly reduced as a result of the small person transformation, and it took a considerable amount of magic power to block the 3 of them. My head hurt, blood flowed from my nose. The constellation Nation's Independence Activist has blessed you. Along with the message, the magic power required to use the stigma decreased, and my body became comfortable. I heard the voice of a constellation in my head. Child, this is the only time I will respond to a call. Thank you, martyr. History is recorded in order not to repeat mistakes. Make sure you don't repeat the past for the sake of individual success. The constellation seemed to notice that I used her for excessive directing. I used nonviolent zone for violence, and the constellation became angry. I barely managed to nod and looked around nervously. Nonviolent zone has 30 seconds left. Once nonviolent zone ended, I had to run to the force power with all of my power. The swords were filled with a tremendous magic power and were determined to cut me in two. I might not die here, but I would be seriously wounded if I made a mistake. 15 seconds, 14 seconds, 13 seconds. Then a questionable message was heard. The constellation Defense Master commiserates with your plight. Huh? The moment I heard the name of a familiar constellation, there was a strange sound and explosive gunfire was heard. The character Gongpildu has activated Armed Fortress Level 1.